Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to say hello from the west side of Jacksonville. I also wanted to say how much we appreciate you being a part of this webinar. We got a couple great guests, very knowledgeable on the current situation. I wish this current situation wasn't what it is, but it is, and we're rolling with it. We're also trying to figure out all the technical aspects of being on a webinar, and so we appreciate everybody having patience with us. I wanted to say something really clear to the attendees. There are a lot of moving parts, and not all of the questions today cannot be answered because the decisions have not been made in Washington that would help us to be fully aware of what's going to come down tomorrow, for example. But we're going to do our best. We got experts on the webinar today that can help you. And we will continue to have these webinars to keep you up to speed on what's happening and to make sure you're aware and educated on how to navigate the federal stimulus. I have some great guests with us today. I'd like to bring them to the webinar and start talking through what they have done over the last several weeks. But we have Ron Eidshaug, Vice President of Congressional and Public Affairs from the U.S. Chamber. Ron, thank you so much for making time to be with us today. We really appreciate it in Jacksonville, and Northeast Florida appreciates what you've been doing for us in DC. And we also have Thaddeus Hammond, Economic Development Specialist from the SBA. And I'm sure you're going to have lots of questions, both of you. And we appreciate you, Thad, for taking time with us. He's actually a St. Augustine guy living in Jacksonville, doing hard work for the people here in our community. So with that, Thaddeus, you want to give us a rundown of the SBA and what it does and your job, and that can lead us into a lot of questions and answers towards the end. Thaddeus.
Okay, great. Thank you, Daniel. On behalf of our District Director, Acting District Director, Gil Connor, I'd just like to say thank you, Daniel, and the Chamber for inviting us on this call this morning. It's so important to speak with you about what we have going on with the COVID-19. Now, our core mission is to help small businesses start, grow, expand, and recover after disaster. And I think it's important that we tie in our mission and what we do, the programs and services we provide, with both the PPP CARES Act and the EIDL, or Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So first and foremost, we provide access to capital through our 78504 and microloan programs. Those are loan guarantee programs. So remember that when we start talking about the PPP later. We also have a wonderful group of resource partners to provide management and technical assistance. We have a federal government contracting program or 4 programs, socioeconomic programs, and disaster assistance is another key part and parcel to the support we provide to the local business community here and abroad. And so with disaster assistance, unlike the 504 and 7A loan guarantee programs, disaster assistance comes directly from the U.S. Treasury. And so that's the only time the SBA has direct dollars to lend to those small businesses that need the support. So again, I just wanted to make sure we kind of tie that in as we go through. So I'll just spend a few moments talking about and touching on the Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Program, which our resource partner, the Small Business Development Center, doing a great job. It's a $50,000 bridge loan that is supported through the Department of Economic Opportunity. And the reason I'm mentioning the bridge loan on this call is a lot of individuals have applied for the bridge loan and who will subsequently apply for either the Economic Injury Disaster Loan or the Paycheck Protection Program. And so we tell them, because that's a $50,000 loan with a 1-year term, fold that, you can apply for the EIDL or PPP and fold that bridge loan into one of those other larger loans, because for instance, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan has a 30-year term max and with a 12-month deferment period. So if you fold it into that particular loan, then you get that space you may need. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, and I will run through that, shortly, just spending about 5 to 10 minutes on it. That loan is there to help small businesses with working capital, whether you are a small business, small agricultural cooperative, and aquaculture, and of course, private nonprofit. And again, like I said, I will walk through that program. And of course, the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security Act, has part of that act, the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, and Ron's going to touch on that. The U.S. Chamber did a tremendous job of pushing out last week some relevant information about the PPP and how it's going to work. We just received some new guidance last night in an interim final rule, but as Daniel stated earlier, this is a fast-moving train with moving parts, and so we will try to provide as much information as possible, but just know the guidance is forthcoming, and as he stated, also, there will be questions we won't be able to answer here today until we receive that guidance. But before I get started with the economic injury disaster loan basics, I just want to give a shout out to our resource partners. SCORE here in Jacksonville, Gainesville, Volusia, Flagler, the Nature Coast, the Villages, Orlando, and the Space Coast SCORE chapters have been doing a phenomenal job of supporting this effort, the economic injury disaster loan effort, answering questions, helping small businesses with the disaster loan application process and the application itself. So we thank you so much. And of course, the Florida Small Business Development Center, the Veterans Business Outreach Center, and of course, here locally, the Jacksonville Women's Business Center. So we thank all of our resource partners for the support that you've been providing to individuals here in our local entrepreneurial ecosystem. So the EIDL loan basics is what we call it, and as I stated earlier, working capital loan for small businesses, and of course this includes businesses directly affected by disasters, other businesses indirectly related to any industry likely to be harmed by their losses, and of course services directly related to the businesses in the declaration. Once a federal declaration is made, then of course small businesses and individuals who are harmed due to the disaster can apply for aid or request aid. So for an example, a manufacturer of widgets can be eligible, as well as a wholesaler and retailer of a certain product. So criteria for loan approval. The credit history, applicants must have credit history acceptable to SBA, but now that's not the only criteria that we look at. Sometimes there's a situation, for instance, if say you had credit frozen, you were denied because you had credit frozen, you went back and you got it fixed, you had it unfroze, you then sent a letter of explanation to the Office of Disaster Assistance, SBA, and then they reconsidered the application, and in one case, a couple of cases, we had approval. So and then to repayment, we have to determine that you have the ability to repay the loan. And again, one thing we are trying to do is help as many small businesses as possible here. This is unprecedented, and we know that a lot of businesses are hurting through no fault of their own. So we will do all we can to approve as many of these loans as possible. And eligibility, you've got to be physically located in the declared area and of course suffered working capital losses because of the disaster, in this case COVID-19. Now, and that it doesn't matter what the economy was doing before the disaster, but as long as you suffered working capital losses due to the disaster, and all of you have, then you're eligible. Now, when we say physically located, that does not mean if you have a post office box that you're physically located. Physical location means a physical address. So you must have a physical address, and you can't use PO boxes. So how much can you borrow? Up to $2 million. On the interest rate is 3.75% for those small businesses and 2.75% for private nonprofits. And as I stated earlier, the terms are up to 30 years. And the use for, and it's, of course, eligibility is based on the size of the business. And we look at small business size as determined by the small business size standards in the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations. Now, how do you use the funds? You can use to pay fixed debt, payroll costs, accounts payable, any other bills that would have been paid had a disaster not occurred. Collateral. Unlike the PPP, collateral is required on this loan over $25,000. Now, we will use real estate and we'll take real estate as collateral if it's available. However, we will not decline a loan for lack of collateral, but we just ask that you pledge whatever collateral is available. But again, we will not decline an application just because you don't have the collateral needed. So what kind of small businesses can apply? Businesses like sports vendors, retailers, souvenir shops, travel agencies, wholesalers, recreational facilities, charter boats, manufacturers. Those are industry types that can apply for the loan. And again, you got to have a physical presence in the declared area in order to request this particular loan. So what's different between this loan and any other loan? As I stated earlier, we have an access to capital, and in our access to capital program, we have a 50478 loan guarantee program. That loan guarantee is, there's a certain percentage of loans guaranteed by the SBA. Your participating lender network provides the funding and the loans for our participating lender, for our small businesses. On the economic injury loans, these funds come directly from the U.S. Treasury. So there's no middleman, there's no need for a guarantee. This is the only time that the SBA has direct funds, and so I'm sorry. And so these funds are available. And so we of course encourage folks to go out and apply for the economic injury disaster loan. And of course, there's a new twist to that loan, and that's a $10,000 forgivable advance to that particular loan. It doesn't matter whether you applied for the EIDL, you were denied, or your application is still pending. You can still apply for the advance, and it is a forgivable advance. So it's $10,000. I recommend you go out and apply. So again, you don't go through your bank to apply for the EIDL loan. You apply directly with our Office of Disaster Assistance at disasterloan.sba.gov. No cost, no obligation on your part. You can still have an existing SBA disaster loan and qualify for an EIDL loan. You just can't consolidate the two. Like I was saying, you could fold the bridge loan into the disaster loan. But if you have an existing SBA disaster loan, let's say Hurricane Michael, you can still apply for and receive the EIDL loan, but you can't consolidate the two. What you would do is just you maintain payment. Matter of fact, those payments are being deferred now until the end of the year on the existing disaster loans, but you can't consolidate those loans. So basic filing requirements, what's needed is your tax authorization form, or 4506T, request for transcripts of tax return. Of course, the loan application itself is a Form 5 or Form 5C. The Form 5 is for everyone except sole proprietors. Sole proprietors will complete the SBA Form 5C. You need your recent copies of your federal income tax returns, the schedule of liabilities, and an SBA Form 413, which is a personal financial statement. Now, the Office of Disaster Assistance may request other information, and And so if that's the case, please provide what they need. One thing I'll note is gather all your documents together before you start to apply, because there are some issues with the system, whether you get timed out. So save, and remember to write down that application number. Now, other information that they may request, they will want all the schedules and copies of all the principals, officers, management members, and the like. They need their federal tax returns as well. So if the most recent income tax return hadn't been filed, which a lot of you have not, a year profit and loss statement and balance sheet for the year. So your financials for the year will suffice, and of course a quarterly profit and loss statement or financial statement for filing. Okay. The SBA Form 1368 provides your monthly sales figures, and this is really important here. Make sure you add that. And anytime there's information that you can't include in the application, insert an addendum, and you write the letter of explanation or whatever the issue is, include it in the package explaining what you need the agency to know. Okay. So what are some of the ineligible entities here? Charitable organizations, religious organizations, casinos and racetracks, and gambling concerns are the top list, and of course agricultural enterprises. Now, if a gambling concern derives more than a third of their annual gross revenue from legal gambling activities, they are ineligible. But if it's less, then of course they can. Casinos and racetracks, of course, it doesn't matter. You're not eligible at all. Again, how to apply. There are a couple of websites, and we've got a newer website for the EIDL Advance, but you can always go to www.sba.gov and find information. But there's /disaster if you want a paper loan application. But the electronic loan application system is https://disasterloan.sba.gov/ELA.
And just for our members, Thaddeus, we'll make sure we get you, if you're on the webinar, we'll make sure we get all of those addresses to you, so you don't have to try to write it all down so fast. I thank you so much, Thaddeus, that getting us started. Right. I would say I have had a couple people comment on how loud the birds are in my backyard. I apologize for that. But the problem is if I go inside, I've got my kids and my dogs, so I really can't go anywhere else. I think most everybody's dealing with a lot of these situations. So just bear with me, and I'll mute whenever I can. We have Ron here with the U.S. Chamber, has done a yeoman's work up in D.C. Ron, you want to walk us through what you've been working on over the last month and how the U.S. Chamber is working with us to help get the right message out and make sure that we're protecting all the folks that receive a paycheck?
Sure. So, you know, for the past 2 weeks, we've been trying to figure out what this new law means more than anything else. And in the 2 weeks prior to that, we were trying to get ready for that law to get passed. So a couple of weeks ago now, Congress passed the CARES Act. It's $2 trillion of liquidity to get into the business community. There's provisions for big business in there. There's payroll tax relief that's generally for larger businesses and medium-sized businesses. There's credit facilities for medium and big businesses that Treasury and the Federal Reserve will work on. And there's the EIDL program that Thaddeus was talking about. And then there's $350 billion that's set aside in this PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, which is really intended to make sure with the EIDL program that small businesses are able to make it through this pandemic. I think one of the things that's really gratifying to be a Washington, D.C. lobbyist is to see how the left, the right, the up, the down, all the different parties really got together to work on what would be some good solutions. None of these bills are perfect, but they're pretty damn good. On the PPP side, this is a program to keep small businesses going. It's 100% federally guaranteed loan to small business. The best thing about this loan If you do everything that you say you're going to do, the loan turns into a grant. So it's free money from the government. Why is the government giving you free money? So that you can pay your employees, pay your bills, pay your rent, pay those business operating costs, so that when this pandemic is gone, you can get back to work, you can get back to running your business, you can get back to paying your people because people are paying you. So that's the really important thing. I'm going to walk through this. Applications start today. So for businesses and sole proprietors, today is the day that you can start submitting applications. For independent contractors and self-employed individuals, you can start on April 10th. Where do you send your application? Talk to your banker. The PPP program is essentially going through banks. And what do I mean by banks? Right now it's 7A banks. So it's banks that have a relationship with SBA. They are Treasury is working really, really hard to make sure that FDIC banks, credit unions, farm credit system institutions are all eligible for this. So at the end of the day, the bank that you're dealing with now should be the bank that you deal with to talk about the Paycheck Protection program. You know, Thaddeus was talking about everything with the EIDL program and the loan application stuff there. They deserve a really, they did a great job sort of turning on a dime. The EIDL program has existed for a long time. The CARES Act ramped that up on steroids for disaster recovery for this pandemic. It required SBA to redo their applications and all of that kind of stuff. The qualifications are much less. Their application had to be rewritten, and that happened really, really quickly. The PPP application is 4 pages. I got it here. I looked at it. One of my friends filled it out, said it took him 15 minutes. 2 pages of the application is the usual government speak that doesn't matter. Privacy Act, Paperwork Reduction Act. You don't have to worry too much about that. It's really a front and back. You know, supermarket shopper card is more complex, more information that you need than the Paycheck Protection application. So the paperwork should not dissuade anybody from going out to do this program. The recommendation is that you do this quickly. There's a $350 billion cap on this. So I don't want everybody to jump off this call and go to their bank and start applying right now. You have a little bit of time to get your stuff together. Let's put $350 billion in context. Over 1/4, the entire payroll of the entire small business community is about $700 billion. So the CARES Act is throwing half of a quarter of payroll into the system for essentially 2 months. So this is a massive amount of money coming into the small business sector. So you have a little bit of time to get your ducks in a row, make sure you have your information together, make sure you can do some calculations before you talk to your banker or after you've talked to your banker 2 or 3 times before you actually do the application. Who's eligible for this? So small businesses with less than 500 employees, small businesses that meet SBA standards, 501c3s with less than 500 employees, so charities are eligible. C6 chambers are not, and we can get into that if you want to talk about it. Individuals who are sole proprietors, they are eligible. Individuals who operate as independent contractors are eligible. Self-employed who regularly carry on trade or business, eligible. Tribal businesses and C19 veterans organizations are eligible. There's some weird special rules. If you're in the hospitality sector and you've got a lot of locations, it's 500 people per location. We can get into that if you want. But by and large, 500 or less, you're going to be good to go. What are lenders looking for? Not a whole lot. Like I said, the goal of Congress is to flood the small business sector with money, to keep small businesses liquid, keep small businesses operating. So number one, you got to prove that the uncertainty of current economic conditions have made the loan request necessary. That is an extremely low bar. That you're going to use the loan to keep workers, maintain payrolls, pay your mortgage, pay your lease, pay your utility payments. those kinds of things. You can't have a duplicative loan somewhere else and that you haven't received a duplicative loan. So the bar is really low on what the banks and what SBA and Treasury are looking for here. How much can you borrow? The cap is $10 million, and it's based on 2.5 times a borrower's average monthly payroll costs. So 2.5 times what you're paying people. On top of that, so what does that include? It includes salary, wage, commission, all of that kind of stuff. Tips, that's included. The typical costs that businesses pay for vacation leave, parental leave, medical leave, sick leave. There's even allowances in here for costs associated with having to sever a poor performing employee, payments for group healthcare benefits, payments for retirement benefits, payments for state and local taxes assessed on compensation. So that 2.5 times, really, Congress meant that to include as much as possible. They want that 2.5 multiplier to be as big as, I'm sorry, not the 2.5, the borrower's average monthly payroll costs to be as big as possible to make sure that they are covering everything that you are paying as a small business. For sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed, it's the sum of payments of any compensation for wage, commission, income, net earnings that you're receiving. The only real cap on this is the costs are capped for employees at $100,000. So if you have an employee making $120,000, the first $100,000 is eligible. Above that is not. There's a couple of payroll taxes, railroad retirement taxes, and things like that that are not eligible. Some qualified sick leave payments that are paid for under the Phase 2 bill are not applicable here. But by and large, most of the payments that you're paying are covered. The loan, payments on the loan are deferred for 6 months. The loan is due in 2 years. The interest rate on the loan is going to be 1% or less. So, and then, like I said, the loan, the interest payments are forgiven, go away for 6 months. Why do they go away for 6 months? Because by the end of June, if you did everything that you said you would do, you kept paying your employees, even if they weren't doing any work, you paid your lease, you paid your utility bills, the loan goes away. It turns into a grant. So this is really a great deal. Maybe at this point we can get into some questions. I just want to thank you, Daniel, for doing this. It's Congress's job to get the money out there. They did it. Now it's our job as the business community to make sure that we take advantage of these opportunities, because we as the business community have a really, really important role to make sure that the economy after this pandemic is over gets back to economic growth as quickly as we can after this immediate crisis has passed.
Wow, thanks, Ron. Really appreciate that update and all the hard work the U.S. Chamber does for us in D.C. We do have a ton of questions coming in as we speak. Ladies and gentlemen, there are over 500 people on this webinar. And obviously, with 30 minutes of questions and answers, we're not going to be able to get to everybody, but we're going to do our best. I have our team sending me the questions that would probably apply to most everybody. So with that, if we could go ahead and get started. Thaddeus, the first question for you, can you receive both a loan through the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program and Paycheck Protection, or is it one or the other?
So it's one, you can't have both at the same time. So, but what you can do is you can apply for both and choose which one best suits you and your needs. But you can't have both at the same time. As I stated earlier, if you can have that bridge loan, which is a state of Florida loan, and fold it into either one of those loans. But you can't have both at one time.
Thank you. Ron, if you have some essential employees and some not, should you apply for payroll protection for everyone?
Yes, absolutely. So payroll protection is for your employees, whether they're working or not. So if they're essential and you're paying them, you qualify. If they're non-essential and they're at home not working, they qualify too.
Okay. Keep the questions coming, y'all. They're all coming in now. For Thad, how are business losses calculated? For example, a business that has just started 2 years ago, it's hard to have a baseline. What should we consider when we're calculating?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of your question,
Okay.
Daniel. Can you?
Nope. Yeah, no problem. How are business losses calculated? For example, a business that has just started 2 years ago, it's hard to have a baseline. What should we do when we're considering our calculation?
Good. You have to take into account all your fixed debts, all the costs for running the business, all your accounts payable, all of your payroll costs, all of your any fixed debt and any other bills that would otherwise keep the business running is what you utilize to make that calculation. And that's what we're looking for.
And Daniel, can I actually jump in on that? This is more on the Paycheck Protection side, but for newer businesses that haven't been open for a year, there's two different look back provisions for how you're assessing payroll costs. So there's one window of looking basically through from last spring. So it's either February 15th or March 1st through June 30th to determine your employment. There's also another option for January 1st of 2020 through February 29th of 2020. So newer businesses have flexibility on the PPP side.
Good. Yeah, true. And see those seasonal employees, as you just mentioned.
Yes, absolutely. Also for seasonal employees too. Yes.
Yeah, I would tell you that whether the question's geared towards one or the other, just jump in and we'll make sure we get the information out. Directed at Thad, can a business that was in operation prior to February 15th, but that was purchased after February 15th, still qualify as an applicant under the CARES Act?
No, if the purchase was made, no. If they are in the middle of a change of ownership, they are not eligible. Ron, you want to jump in on that one?
So number one, I'm gonna give my best guess here. And frankly, I can't answer every question for every business because I don't know the answer, particularly for the Paycheck Protection side. The really, really good thing about this is that the Paycheck Protection program is run by your bank. So there's a lot more bankers than there are SBA employees. So you should be able to get in to talk to someone much more easily and ask the bank about this. But it would be my expectation that if there's a change in ownership, that you would be eligible for the PPP because you've got a reference point for how many employees there were last year, and if you're still making the payroll and the rent and all of those kinds of things, but double check with your bank on that.
Okay, perfect. This is for both. I'm a small business owner and I'm the only employee, no contractors. I know the original SBA loan program didn't apply to me, but I hear there is a new one for gig, single workers. You'll probably cover it, but was wondering which I should apply for.
So I'm gonna take this one and I'm gonna start. We get a lot of questions of whether should I go for EIDL or should I go for PPP? That's something that I can't answer because I don't know well enough. They're two great programs and you got to run the numbers for yourself. Specifically on PPP, talk to your banker. On the EIDL stuff, Thad and his colleagues are going to be great helps and great resources. I do know that specifically that if you're a gig worker, it's Congress's intention to make sure that you are included here. And there are provisions of the PPP for gig economy workers. Just a funny story. I've been doing a lot of these presentations. Thad is the best that I've seen in giving answers on the SBA side. He's not the best because he's better than everybody else. He's better because he has 24 hours more information than the folks who were talking yesterday. And to point that out, on the gig side, independent contractors. Guidance came out last night at I think it was like 10 o'clock, Thad, that gig economy workers are eligible through PPP and not through another employer. So gig economy workers should go right through the PPP. They shouldn't rely on someone else to do that. You know, that could also be, you know, a general contractor who's building houses. It's got a lot of subcontractors. Those independent contractors can file for themselves. So at least on the PPP side, there are provisions in there for gig workers, independent contractors, on all that stuff. I don't know if that's the best way for you. I think you're probably eligible also on the idle side. So I'll throw it over to Thad.
They certainly are, Ron. Thank you so much. Any independent contractor, sole proprietor, gig worker, you are eligible under the EIDL, just as a PPP. And thank you for the distinction too, Ron, because there are, although both are similar, there are some differences. And so we just have to make sure we stay apprised of that. And again, it's a moving target. And as guidance, you know, comes to us, we will let you guys know.
Matt, just for technical issues, I had a text that they couldn't hear. Just make sure that the volume is working properly for all the listeners, if that's possible. The next question, are nonprofits considered a small business as defined under the $348 billion CARES Act?
So small businesses qualify under the PPP. So there's $350 billion out there. And like I said, the nonprofit is C3 nonprofit. So I think that that's going to capture most of them. And then also C19 veteran organizations, C6 organizations, nonprofits that are small, local, regional, state chambers of commerce, U.S. Chamber of Commerce. C6s are not eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. We expect that those organizations are eligible for the EIDL program, although we're still waiting to find out for sure on that. But I'm assuming, for the sake of this question, that that's a C3 asking, they are eligible for the PPP. So you can, Congress's goal is to make sure that whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit, you're paying your people, you're paying your workers, you're paying your rent, you're paying your mortgage.
The same on the idle side. Private nonprofits are eligible for the idle program.
Yeah, I think the idle version in the law is different than the PPP version in the law, and I think that the idle version is a little bit more expansive. But again, I think it's going to take some time to sort everything out.
Get it. And the next question kind of deals with something we were talking about right before the program started. Let me go back to it. And how busy it's going to be today for banks and people, you know, flooding the infrastructure to figure this out. I've been discussing daily with my business banking institution, and as of yesterday afternoon, my loan officer has not received direction to where to start from the SBA PPP process. Can you provide an update on when this will be resolved and how we're communicating with banks? It's probably Thaddeus, but Ron, you can jump in too.
Yeah, so right now, thank you for the question, Daniel. Right now, it is tough. It's a fast-moving train. There hasn't been a lot of guidance. Guidance is forthcoming, as you well know, based on your earlier comment and based on Ron's earlier comment. The interim final rules literally were published last night. So they don't have a lot of guidance. However, a lot of those participating lenders in our network are ready and raring to go, and we'll receive a lot of calls today from those individuals ready to apply. Just, you know, go to your financial institution. It's a lot of them, they know, they understand it. Yes, they are waiting on some guidance, so are we, but just have some patience. We're going to work through this together and make sure you guys are made whole. And that's what my advice to you would be.
Yeah, and just following on that, it gets confusing here because we're talking about EIDL and PPP. And EIDL is an SBA program, and it's largely up and running. Go ahead, Thad.
Yeah, that's good, because EIDL is an Office of Disaster Assistance. The funds are coming straight from the U.S. Treasury. The PPP, that's the SBA loan guarantee, which 100% is guaranteed, and your participating lender network drives the train in that one.
Yeah. So it's two different programs, and what banks have been waiting to get has been to get an official guidance, or I guess this is an interim final rule. They've been waiting for paperwork to come to tell them how to deal with all of this stuff. And that got released yesterday. It got released yesterday. I got the email at like 10 o'clock last night. So Treasury did it late in the day. Treasury has been, like everybody else, has been working overtime to try and figure out all of this stuff. The document that that Treasury provided to banks and is going to be published today in the Federal Register is like 32 pages, 33 pages. So in the grand scheme of things, for a $350 billion program, 33 pages is pretty thin information. So that is just out there. The person who got the question of, I was talking to my banker last night, 5 minutes later, they just got this. I think banks are going to need some time to figure this stuff out. I think this is my editorial comment. This is also going to be difficult for banks to wrap their head around. What do bankers do? They assess risk. They assess whether you're a good risk of their money. What's the PPP program? The PPP program is a C5 Galaxy a cargo plane full of money that is getting shoveled out the back. That is very, very different than what a banker typically deals with. So just in terms of headspace and thinking about this program, they're going to have to think about it a little bit differently, and it's going to take them some time. So like I said, today is the first day that for businesses and sole proprietorships that you can go to your bank and be eligible for this program. If it was me, I might wait until tomorrow or Monday to actually do that and let someone else be the guinea pig. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin has said that it's his expectation that you go in, you talk to your banker on the morning, and by that afternoon or evening, there's money in your account under the Paycheck Protection Program. So they really want to turn this around fast, but it's going to take them some time to figure out how to actually do that fast.
Yeah, also, just to piggyback on what Ron was saying about the interim final rule, remember, it's an interim final rule that's being published. The final rule is yet to be published, and so once that final rule is published, we may see some different rules in there. So just again, be patient.
That's a good point. And I guess I would say, is there any reason to stampede to the bank today? Is it something that, guys, let's take our time, let's make sure we do it right. There's no super rush. I know that everybody's on edge, but can you give some guidance to everybody on how they should feel today?
You want to go first, Thad?
Sure. Again, the PPP program and the participating lender network that we have, it's one of these issues in terms of the anxiety that everyone's feeling. Everybody's anxious, they want to get in there and go, but as Daniel was stating, and Ryan said earlier, you got to be patient. You don't want to rush in. I would call your participating lender, the person you have a relationship with. I would make an appointment. Some of the financial institutions may not be available today. They are still trying to digest this information. They want to make sure that they have everything in order they need in order to service you. So just be patient. Once you figure out that your financial institution is available, make the appointment and go and see them and apply for the PPP.
Yeah, and I would follow on that with the point that I made earlier about $350 billion. That's a lot of money for small businesses. This program is capped. I would not wait until the middle of June to apply for this program. This program runs through the end of June, but I don't think if it was me, the way that I look at my finances and things like that, I think you're better served to make sure that you got the tax returns or whatever information you're going to need. You've got that all together. You've been able to take a little bit of time to look at the EIDL stuff and the PPP stuff, because you can't really do both. Figure out which one is going to be better for you, and then actually apply for the PPP. If you go Wednesday next week, you got to give the bankers some opportunity to sit down to talk to you for 45 minutes. I think I'd go quickly, but I don't know that I'd go with my hair on fire. And I think also on both of these programs, whether it's PPP or whether it's EIDL, I think that you can be fairly certain that money is coming your way. On the EIDL side, there's a $10,000 grant with very, very few questions asked. On the PPP side, it's a very low bar to show economic injury and pulling together the information to say that, I paid my employees this much last year, or I'm a sole proprietor, I'm an independent contractor, and this is how much money I made as an Uber driver or as a drywall hanger or something like that. You've got that information, so you should be fairly confident that you're going to be able to qualify and get that money. The onus on you to prove something to the government is really, really small, because Congress wants to get this money in your pocket to keep the economy moving.
Those are great answers. Yeah, go ahead, Thaddeus.
I was going to say that's great, because the main thing that we're looking at is ensuring that we get money into as many hands as possible, and that's suggested. So a lot of the guidelines will be relaxed.
This is probably a quick answer. Does this apply to realtors?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
Yeah. And if you have rental property, because you're losing money on rent, you can apply on the EIDL program. And I'm sure the PPP as well, right, Ryan?
Yeah. And I wonder how that will work out, and showing what you were making and those kinds of things, but yes.
Okay, I'm just going down the list. So we may have already touched on this, but if you apply for EIDL, how long will it take for determination?
Normally about 3 days, 3 to 4 days. When we first opened up a couple of weeks ago, we had decisions within a couple of days. They are trying to turn these applications around as soon as possible. So it's taking a few days. But just be prepared to wait at least a week, and you can always go back and check the status of your application. Just there's an icon with an eye on it. Check the status of your application.
Okay. Can someone provide information on the loans available at 5% interest? The repayment of these loans are also deferred for a year. Is this the same loan? Explain more about the loan transition into a grant. We talked a little bit about it, but could you explain?
Nothing's 5%. The EIDL loan is you can borrow up to $2 million, and the interest rate is 3.75% for the businesses and 2.75% for private and nonprofits. There's a 12-month deferment period on that particular loan, and the grant portion of that loan would be the $10,000 loan advance, the EIDL loan advance, which I would encourage everyone to apply for if you're applying for the EIDL program. So that's the program. We don't have anything with a 5% interest rate that I'm aware of. So Ron, do you?
Yeah, I don't know what the subject of the 5% is. I know that one thing that I heard, and Thad, you may know this better than me, is that for this period, if you have SBA loans that you're paying back now, SBA is either paying the interest on them now, or the interest is set aside for some of those existing programs.
They're paying for 6 months, right? They're pushing it aside for 6 months, and they're making you whole, so you don't have to worry about making a payment. But just now, I think the interest still accrues on those loans while they are waiting on that. They have that 6 month period deferment.
And then on the Paycheck Protection side, and when the loan turns into a grant, so you you say that you're eligible for a $500,000 loan. You get that under the Paycheck Protection Program. You get that money for the next 2 months, the next 8 weeks since you received the money throughout this program. You pay your workers, you pay your rent. The way that the loan is set up, it assumes that at least 75% of the money that you get is for payroll and payroll associated expenses. The stuff on top of that, the rent, the utilities, that's in that other 25%. So you do that. Basically, you pay your bills, the grant goes away. You pay your employees similarly to the way that you did last year before the crisis. You pay your rent, pay your mortgage, pay your utilities. The loan turns into a grant.
All right. One important question probably, can a small business owner pay their own salary through the PPP?
So yeah, so if a small business owner was paying their salary this time in the look back period, so last spring, if they were paying their salary last spring, that's from what I understand, I am like 99.9% certain that expense is eligible now. Double check with your banker. I looked through this guidance a little bit, so I think that that's included, but it should be because it's a payroll cost.
All right. For Ron, is it better to keep an employee on the payroll for 8 weeks, even though they can collect more in furlough status through unemployment? How does PPP work with furloughed workers?
So to qualify for unemployment or for furloughed workers to get unemployment and things like that, you're not paying them anymore. People who are on unemployment are no longer eligible for unemployment if they are getting paid and back to work. So I think I think that that's probably up to the business owner. The goal of Congress in this situation is to make sure that businesses continue to pay employees so that when we bounce back from this pandemic, people are ready to go back to work. And I think that in most instances, this is contemplating that employees are paying more than they would make on unemployment. This bill is not perfect. This law is not perfect. Could someone make more money on unemployment than they would under payroll protection or something like that? Yeah, I think so. I think that those probably are the outlier. As the business owner, what's in the best interest of your employees is something that you're going to have to look at. The intent of the Payroll Protection Program is to make sure that those people keep getting their payroll, their health care. They don't have to pay for COBRA. All of those, they're not in the exchange, all of those kinds of things, so that pandemic is over, you can go back to work, those people can go back to work the next day, and we can get back to normal as quickly as we can.
Okay, question for either. My payroll doubled in 2020 versus 2019. When I run my 2019 average, it's not enough to cover 8 weeks of payroll in my current status. How do I deal with this?
So, Thad, I'm going to go out on a limb here because I think that in this instance, you can't use an EIDL and a PPP for the same problem, the same costs. I wonder if in this instance you could use the PPP for payroll and an EIDL loan for rent or utilities or those kinds of things. I'm speculating here. I'm trying to give an answer, but I don't know.
Yeah, of course, they can't use both, but in the situation when they look back at last year's payroll and they get that 2-month average, they'll also, what we do is we multiply that average times 2.5. And so if they looked at that average 2-month average, and then they put the multiplier in there, and they still don't feel as if they're coming up with enough. They need to write a letter of explanation to the banker and explain to him where they are right now from January 1 to March the 15th or whatever the date was, or maybe January or February, I'm sorry, the month of January and February, and explain how these 2 months differ significantly and would make a difference in them meeting the payroll.
So Thaddeus, there's already interim rules for this, or is it something that you expect?
Something we expect. I have not, unfortunately, like Ron said, it came about 10 o'clock last night. I saw it. I glanced over it, didn't really have an opportunity to dive into it.
What, Thad? You wanted to get some sleep last night? I mean, come on.
I think a good night's sleep to help everybody right now. It's been pretty crazy. We're coming up towards the end. It's got about 4 minutes left. Trying to think, going through this, and I just want to let all of our people know we're going to continue these. We're going to have another webinar on Tuesday where we'll try to get to some of these questions with experts. But let me see if I can get one last. If I qualify for 100,000 PPP loan, will the SBA give me 100,000 up front? Are the funds loaned as a payroll, or is it paid?
I think it's a check. So you're going to get the money in your account as a lump sum.
Yeah.
And the disincentive is if you don't use it for payroll, you use it for tequila, then you have to pay it back.
Yeah.
But if you use it for payroll and all those kinds of things, then it's forgiven. So there's an
Are you saying we can't buy tequila? I mean, is that what you're saying, Ron?
You gotta have your cortisol. You need your cortisol, Ron.
But if you buy tequila,
well, let's mute Ron on the rest of that. Last question: if PPP is based on payroll, how can rental companies with no payroll qualify? I have multiple clients that own commercial rental properties that all tenants have stopped paying. They do not have a payroll. How would you address that issue?
So I think in that instance, that's where the idle comes in. And I think that this is what, Congress's intent with this kind of stuff was to make sure that small businesses get money to continue. And I think Congress also was trying to recognize the complexity of the small business sector, where you've got people that pay employees, you've got independent contractors, and you've got people like this person dealing with rental properties, and coming up with the idle and the PPP to cover those different eventualities. So that, I think I'm right, is that would be more appropriate for an idle.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm sorry, Daniel, the phone is ringing here. I didn't hear the question, but I will say though that under the idle program, if you're losing rental payments from your renters, you can use idle program for the recovery of those funds. So yes, you can apply under the idle program.
And idle is up to $2 million, so it's not a small loan.
Right. Yeah, $2 million. And again, there's a $10,000 idle advance. Apply for it, receive it. It's a forgivable advance. It's not a loan. It's a grant in essence.
Can you just say that one more time, Thaddeus? Because I think that's very important for our people to understand.
Yeah, that $10,000 idle loan advance is a grant. It's not a loan. So apply for it, receive it. It's a forgivable $10,000 loan.
And I would say this, gentlemen, this has been a fantastic information-powered hour, and I just want to let you know we appreciate you joining us for the bottom of our hearts in Northeast Florida. What you're doing to help our businesses stay afloat means a lot to us. I would like to say to all of our members, we do have an SBA link on our COVID website with the Jax Chamber, so make sure you go there. And it has all the applicable links and information that you're going to need to connect with these folks. And then last 2 p.m. on this upcoming Tuesday, we're going to continue this discussion on how to navigate the federal system. And we look forward to getting the invite out. We'll make sure we get that out to you as soon as possible. But once again, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. It means the world to us. And the people that are listening, I think one of the main things that Ron mentioned was don't light your hair on fire, but get all your information together. You don't have to run down today, but be prepared. Maybe get down there, make an appointment for next week, and make sure that you get all the right information and be successful. And we're all going to get through this together. I'm sure of that. I've never seen a more resilient, more positive group than the folks that we have that own businesses here in this part of our country. So we look forward to seeing you Tuesday. And thank you so much again, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Thanks
having
very
us.
much.
You guys have a great day.
Take care.
You too.